Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 266 of CryptoBiography, and it's the part 3 of The Smallest Magician. And here we go. Lavera had her helper get some of the items on the list. While Timmy does that, let's talk, Lavera said. Oh, what about? Emby asked. Whatever it is you got on your mind. You say things have been quiet, but you got something going on in that little head of yours. I'm sorry, Lavera. I just can't. Lavera looked disappointed. Well, little britches, I won't tell you your business, but I know that look. Something's eating at you. If you need to get it off your chest, come see me, okay? Okay, Emby said, and meant it. Timmy came back with some of the items Emby needed. One thing, some fennel. Lavera didn't happen to have that day. Lavera had Timmy go and find some for Emby, so she wouldn't have to wander the markets too long or too far. Emby didn't want the conversation to come back to what she was hiding, so she instinctively went on the offensive. May I ask you a question, Lavera? Sure, little britches. What happened to Dennis? My husband. Lavera stopped talking, which was rare for her. You've mentioned him so much, but always as though it has been a long time. I've always wondered what happened to him. Did he die? Lavera took a moment, looking down at Emby the whole time. She tried hard to look back. Well, darling, I don't really know what happened to Dennis. He just left our house one night, and he never come home. Oh. I'm sorry, Emby said, not knowing what else to say. That's okay. I am too. No one ever found out about him? Nope. Best guess is he died somewhere out of the way, and his body was never found. Oh. I still miss him. Yeah, I guess you haven't found anyone to replace him. There's no replacing Dennis, little britches. I see. Oh, don't you think I haven't looked, Lavera chortled. I'm a big woman and I have big appetites. But it hasn't ever worked out, even in the short term. Well, if anyone I know deserves love a second time, it's you. Thank you, darling. Timmy came back running. Lavera glanced at his hands, which were empty. She frowned. Where's the fennel? Forget the fennel. Get Emby out of here. That got their attention. What's up? The crier. He's just announced the kobolds have destroyed the village of Emberdown. Lavera took charge. Right. Emby, take the things we've gathered for you, put them on your wagon, and get back home. Timmy, you escort her home. I'll look over the rest of the list and finish it. Timmy will bring it by later. You can pay then, okay? Okay, Emby said, already putting the last items in the wagon and turning it around so she could start pulling it home. Timmy, if anything happens you can't handle, come back to me, Lavera instructed. Emby, I'll check on you later. Thanks, Lavera, Emby said, and she and Timmy headed back towards her home, wagon bouncing slightly on the cobbles. Timmy walked directly behind the wagon, nudging anything that looked like it might be about to bounce out onto the road. Emby couldn't say she knew Timmy well. Lavera had such a big personality, and though Timmy was around her a lot, he was shy, letting Lavera take all the attention. Still, he'd always seemed like a decent enough person, and he certainly proved that he had Emby's best interest at heart by warning him about the news. Some people watched them as they rumbled by, but apparently the news hadn't reached into the side streets yet. They were curious as to their speed and noise, but not angry. They pulled up to the front door. Emby let herself in. She pulled the wagon in just through the front door and thanked Timmy. He nodded and hustled back towards Lavera. Canna came to the front entry from the kitchen area. Emby, why are you hauling the wagon in the front door? Normally she would have brought it in the back, which was cleaner and closer to the kitchen. Emby explained the situation. Canna's face became grimmer and grimmer. I'll have to thank Lavera when things have settled, she said when Emby was finished. Meanwhile, I think you'll need to stay in the house. Emby reluctantly agreed. Lavera did check on Emby, as she had promised. Since all was well, they finished their grocery transaction, and Lavera headed out after giving Emby a big hug. That evening, well after the dinner had been served and cleared away, Emby did a last check on Mr. Donegal. Please trim the wicks, Emby, he said. He wasn't looking up from his book. Do you need anything else? Will you be hungry? Emby asked as she finished. No, thank you. Emby turned to leave. She took a step towards the hidden door without thinking, before correcting herself and going for the door to the hallway. Just before she reached it, Mr. Donegal called to her. "Emby, hold on." She froze. Did he know about her excursion into his office? "Canna let me know what happened. You are, of course, welcome to stay in the house as long as it takes until it's safe for you to leave. However, I wanted to check with you to see if that's what you want." Emby thought about this. What would be the alternative? "I think if we needed to, we could spirit you out of town and get you somewhere else." "There isn't anywhere else for me, Master." "No, I suppose not. I'm sorry for that." Emby turned and looked at him. He had a thoughtful look. Apparently, he really hadn't thought about this before. "Emby?" he said, as if thinking aloud. Still, he hardly ever used her name. They say when someone saves someone else's life, they take on responsibility for them. I have failed to do so. I apologize. Let me think on this. Tomorrow we can talk." "Of course, Master. Good night." "Good night." Emby left her master's quarters and went to the kitchen. Canna was still there, finishing up a few chores. Emby had the idea that she had been waiting for her. "Any word from Master Donegal? We will talk tomorrow. He said he was sorry and that he felt responsible for me." Well, he should. Canna seemed to think this was good enough for her, for now. She put a pot away that she'd been wiping down and walked towards her room with a simple, "Good night, Emby." "Good night." Emby lingered in the kitchen, not sure what she would do next. The sun had gone down hours ago, but a full moon was rising. Even the light through the one small kitchen window was enough for her to see easily, even with color. She went out of the kitchen and to the formal living room. There was a mirror above the fireplace. It was a little high, even for humans. She could not see herself in it at all. It had never made much sense to Emby, though she'd never heard anyone talk about replacing or moving it. There were 2 chairs near the fireplace, close enough to enjoy the heat on a cold winter night. This was late summer, so there was no fire, had not been for months. She dragged one of the chairs to the front of the fireplace and got up on the seat, standing and holding the mantel for support. She rarely saw her own reflection, but felt the need to see it now. She looked at her face. She had small scales all over, mostly brown and green. She understood that it made excellent camouflage, at least when one was not in a formal living room. Her eyes were perhaps the closest to human, having round, deep brown irises. The whites of her eyes were a little more yellow than a human's. When she was very young, Master Donegal had thought she might have jaundice, but over the years they had all come to accept it as just the way her eyes were. She had no hair. Instead, she had a few very small, not terribly pointy nodules on her head that some called horns, though they weren't big enough to be of any use. Her ears were large for her size and pointed. She could hear very well and seemed to have directional hearing better than a human's. She touched her face, feeling every contour. She even ran her fingers over every one of her pointed teeth. She had more than usual for a human, due to the bit of a muzzle she had. There was simply no way. She couldn't go back to the kobolds. She didn't even know a word of kobold language. But she had to find a place here among the humans. She stared at her reflection a long time. So long that her eyes started to play tricks on her. She could swear that there was some kind of dull yellow glow behind her eyes. She squinted her eyes and looked again, and the glow had gone. She went back to her room and pulled out her copy of Donegal's book on magic. She studied the opening pages until her eyelids drooped with sleep, but hardly learned anything else. Perhaps tomorrow she would read further, even if she didn't understand the first pages. And that's the end of the story for this week. I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and Music copyright 2022, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.